housekeeping items. One, we are being recorded for a future airing on the Metro Government channel, so smile. And we have some new faces today, both on the board as well as looks like our legal team, so maybe it warrants a quick go around just for everyone to introduce themselves. So I am Kelly Flannery, Finance Director and Board Chair.
I'm Kim Sansom. I'm with IBEW. I'm the president of the local.
Hello, good morning. My name is Alexandra Rivera. You can call me Alex, and I am a new team member on Macy's team from the Department of Law. Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Alex.
I'm Macy Amos from Metro Legal.
Michelle Hernandez-Lane. I'm the Chief Procurement Officer and Purchasing Agent.
I'm Christopher Wood. I manage our Business Assistance Office.
I'm Jerval Watson. I'm the Business Development Officer for Procurement.
Cynthia Croom, Executive Director, Metropolitan Action Commission.
Larry Turnley, this is my first day. It's an honor to serve on this board and to serve with each one of you. And I just ask, please have the patience of Job as I learn this foreign language right here.
That's a lot of patience.
And welcome, Larry.
Yes.
And I'm Wally Dietz. I'm the Metro Law Director.
So just for Kelly, if I may, for folks, Dr. Croom, Mr. Turnley, Mr. Dietz, Ms. Flannery, and Ms. Sansom are all members of the Procurement Standards Board. And Mr. Turnley is the newly appointed member appointed by the Human Relations Commission.
All right. First,
Do you want to hit the folks around or no?
a lot of people from procurement here.
A lot of procurement staff. We also have Mr. Mike Leonard from General Services in preparation for discussion of procurement regulation modification before the board.
Okay. The first agenda item is approval of previous meeting minutes. Does anyone want to make a motion?
So move.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Everyone approve the minutes? Say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Minutes approved. We'll turn it over to Miss Michelle Hernandez-Lane for the purchasing agent report.
In the interest of time today, I know that the schedule, at least for our board chair, is pretty packed this morning. So we're going to move quickly through the reports that are included here, have been sent out to the board members in advance. So hopefully folks have had an opportunity to review and they can, let us know any questions they have that I normally defer to at the end of my report.
I appreciate that, but I have informed my next board meeting that I'm going to be late. So
okay, she's like,
take the time that this one deserves.
I appreciate it. So moving into the procurement operations for the most recently ended quarter, I will just note there's some basic information that's in the report that you'll see quarter to quarter related to our work with our departments, water services. Mr. Turnley, just so that you know, we meet every 2 weeks with major departments, water services. And when I say major, I mean in the sense of their procurement volume.
Every department's important.
Every department's important, but some of them can eat our lunch if we're not in front of their procurement activity. So, but water services, general services, we meet with the Parks Department, with the Nashville Department of Transportation, and we put that out, to your point, Chair Flannery, to departments if they need that. But what we found is even the police department, we met with them every 2 weeks, and they just didn't need it because of the way that their processing works internally and that they don't have the same volume. So we continue to do that to ensure that we're on top of what that procurement activity is, and you've got the performance metrics for the quarter in your binders that gives you a sense of what our activity's been, our productivity and efficiency. We are beginning to see a loosening, and I think it's worthwhile because I know that a lot of people have heard about, the bottlenecks in the supply chain and all of that. We're beginning to see a slight loosening of that, and much of that was brought on by the pandemic. And initially, it created some limitations in our ability to meet all of the needs for the departments because there were some things that we just couldn't get, and then it impacted pricing on a number of things as well. So we had quite a few vendors who were revisiting their contracts with us and asking us for temporary relief. We held meetings with the departments that were affected by the request, and we made decisions appropriately with those departments because, of course, the money comes from their budgets, about whether or not to grant temporary relief that would allow those suppliers to fulfill the requirements that, they've satisfied. We basically had a negotiation with them. And the way that we talk about it is, you've got a contract that says you'll provide it at this, but if you do, you're probably going to go out of business. We don't want you to bleed to death, but we don't want to bleed to death either. And so we have worked with many of those vendors, creating 6-month intervals for temporary pricing. But we're beginning to see that lessen. Some of the port issues that we saw with storage containers sitting at the port and all those kinds of things, we're seeing less of that. We're also beginning to see an ease up in worker shortages, and that's having an impact on some of the pricing that we're beginning to see. I will say that the war in Ukraine does have an effect on raw material pricing, and we're seeing that especially as it relates to construction work. Prices of aluminum and different things we're seeing to be elevated compared to what they were before. But the end game for us is that we're beginning to see some improvement. From the standpoint of staffing, during the last quarter, we maintained our staffing levels compared to the quarter prior. That did show us with one vacancy in our procurement resource group. We've been working pretty diligently to fill that vacancy, and we're having to repost it to get quality candidates for that position. I do want to note that we did have one promotion, and that was Mr. Daniel Drumright, who's sitting behind me. Daniel was promoted to a senior procurement officer, so we're excited about the opportunities to have growth within the division. The major procurements for the quarter are...
Should we pause for applause for Daniel?
I called him Mr. Rogers this morning. He didn't appreciate that.
He told us.
He's like, Mr. Rogers. The major procurements for the quarter are listed in your binder. In addition to having this chart that gives you some detailed information about each of those contracts, I would draw your attention as well to the abstracts that are listed at the end of the tab, and it will provide you even more detailed information about each one of those contracts. Any questions about any of those?
I don't know if it's a question, but the Business Journal hosted a economic forecast for Nashville last week, and let's pretend economists have a crystal ball and know, but the two that presented on the Nashville economy both agreed that the inflation has peaked in their opinion, and that while it's going to take a while to come back down, they did think that, I think we're at 8% now, that they thought, but this time next year we'd be at 4% and kind of back to a normal, well, not normal, the Fed goal of 2% in another year. So it's good to see you're experiencing what they're pontificating.
Maybe I'm pontificating too. On the DBE utilization, again, BAO staff continues to work toward parity in our purchases. The report of the activity for disadvantaged business for the quarter is listed. And in so much as Chair has advised that we've got some time, I'm going to defer it back to Mr. Wood. I would draw your attention to the EBO annual report that was issued during the last quarter. It presented, I can only just say Christopher and his team, just about all of whom I think are here, with the exception of a couple, have just done a fabulous job, in my opinion. And it's hard because, I used to do the work. And then I get to sit here and be here, looking at how it's being implemented, et cetera. But they've just done a really great job of implementing the program. And we have our third year now where we're seeing really awesome results. So that is a moment to pause and Christopher, feel free to talk a little bit more about that when you present the report. But that report, the annual report, has been submitted as required by the code to the finance director, to me, as well as to our chief diversity, equity, and inclusion officer. As well, it's not required by the code, but we have also disseminated it to this board as well as to the Metro Council. And just briefly, the disparity study, which we've talked a little bit about that. It was funded during this budget, is currently underway, and it's on track. The public hearings, and I want to make sure that you guys know about things that you will potentially hear about related to the study. Public hearings, which are part of the anecdotal research portion of the study, those are designed to solicit public input into the process, and they're scheduled for January. I don't know, Christopher, if the notices went out to the PSB. If they have not, we will make sure. I know that Chair Flannery got a copy of it, but we'll make sure that you have a copy of the notices about that in the event that you're interested in attending.
Maybe just because I think, Wally, this might be your first time. It's my first time doing it here. It's definitely your first time. Just talk a little bit about what disparity study is and the requirements and the legal. It's more than just something fun that Nashville does. Like it's a very regimented process.
Yeah, I mean, so we have what is considered a race and gender-based program, and in order to maintain a program such as this, you have to engage in what is called a factual predicate study, and that factual predicate study serves as our compelling interest, basically, to engage in our race and gender-based program. That study includes a legal analysis, so it provides us with a snapshot of what the legal landscape is in our district, and it looks at the nation to kind of understand leanings across the country. There's a policy review, which looks at our policies to see if we have established any new or different policies that impact utilization, and how well we're doing implementing the policies that we have on the books. It also includes an anecdotal portion, which includes, it's kind of the but-for analysis, if you will. You may have, and I'm jumping the gun, there's the disparity analysis and the availability analysis. Those are the numbers, right? That's like the Geek Squad stuff. They're looking at how much you spent, how much was available, and then looking at the disparity between the two. And then there's the anecdotal piece and the but-for analyses that say, here's what people in the community are saying about your processes and your programs, and, there are focus groups that are included in that, and they make a determination as to whether or not it's possible that discrimination could be the basis for any identified disparity. So it is a detailed and lengthy process. We have precedent across the country that helps us to understand what the best practices are, what has cut muster with the Supreme Court in terms of conducting these factual predicate studies and making sure that our programmatic implementation and administration as well, because they'll do a look of that, is consistent with the programming. So 2 places where the programs kind of get their lunch eaten, basically, is your factual predicate study is no good or is flawed, or you're not administering your program consistent with the design.
And what is it, every 5 years you're legally required?
It's done every 5 years. According to the Equal Business Opportunity Program law, it is to be conducted every 5 years.
So it's a big deal. Thank you.
The last item that I would note is that there were no protest hearings held during the last period. There were 2 procurement appeal hearings held during that last quarter. They were pursuant to activity related to our medical benefits solicitation, which was listed on your report as a protest the last time, so they appealed it. And that was for the Human Resources Department, is for medical benefits for all of the Metro employees. And the second appeal was related to the parking modernization solicitation. It's an effort to modernize on-street parking in Metro, and that was for the Nashville Department of Transportation for NDOT. And that is the snapshot of my report. would like to defer just a few moments to Mr. Wood to discuss our disadvantaged business utilization, and Mr. Val Watson to discuss the business development and outreach for the quarter.
Sorry. Thank you, Michelle, and good morning, board members. So briefly, I'll be brief with mine. So everyone had a chance to
Aggressive there, wasn't you?
Everyone hopefully had a chance to review the business utilization report. So I would just I want to speak on some highlights from that. So from Q1 this year, with MBE spend, we did over 18.5 million, which was more than we did this time last year, and also what we did last quarter. I used it as a comparison what we did in Q4 of FY22. So our MBE spend is up. For the WBE spend, you will notice that that amount is down from Q4 of last year and also from Q1. And then our overall percentage for this quarter is at 4.35%, which when you look at it, you think, why is it going down? Although we have more spend with MBEs and actually when you combine MBEs and WBEs, the spend was actually more. The reason why that percentage is at 4.35% is because our spend this quarter was essentially higher than it has been last quarter and at this time last year. For unique MBEs, there were 58 entities that got paid. There were 64 different WBEs that got paid. And then for our SBE numbers, we spent over $67 million with SBEs, which is 8.66%, which was higher than last quarter. It was down from Q1 this time last year. And we did pay 135 unique SBEs, which was more than we did last quarter and also Q1 of last year.
Remind me, sorry. The SBs don't have to be Nashville-based. They could be nationwide.
Our SBs are Metro approved, so...
Metro approved, but they don't have to be located or headquartered in Nashville. Okay. And we don't track that at all, like Nashville-based companies, and whether they're small or large or anything.
We don't track it like intentionally. We could absolutely get to the data, but we don't have any local preference or anything.
That's the word I was looking for, local.
Yeah, we don't have a local preference.
It might be interesting, though, to still know.
I'd like to point out, just for the benefit of our new board members, because I remember trying to pick up some of this lingo, this report defines what those initials stand for. Also, Dr. Kroom knows this, but Metro's budget year, the fiscal year, starts July 1. So our first quarter is July, August, September. So when they say first quarter, it's just the 3 months that ended September 30th for this report.
Thanks, Wally.
Context is important.
I remember being a rookie.
Well, as I was sitting here, I wondered, we are required to do a board orientation for new board members so they don't come to the meeting not having a clue. So you may want to consider that.
We've done it.
So you already had it. Okay. All right. So then you've had the initial good.
Yeah, it was just showing off.
Okay. So you were being kind to Wally. You didn't want to say, I already know all that. Okay.
We didn't want Mr. Turnley to hit the ground and we want him to be able to run.
The second page that you all have in your binders with the disadvantaged business report, there's our comparative report compared to the other quasi-government agencies. And just when you look at our numbers with spend compared to other agencies, in both MBE and WBE and SBE firms, we did spend more money there as well. And then finally, one thing that you all will not see in your binder this time is we used to have the EBO proposed report that we presented, which is proposed spend for our EBO program. We decided we still are keep tracking that information. I still have it, but to present to the board, we're at a point now within the program that we have actual dollars that are being presented for actual spend that we're able to report as contracts are ending, so that's why that is not there, but I still have it for reference if you all need it. That information will still be included annually in our EBO annual report.
And we want to make sure to kind of take the temperature of this board. At the onset of the Equal Business Opportunity Program, we did not have actual spend data to begin to report to you related to the program. This annual report from EBO was the first year that we did have that. So we wanted to give a kind of an outlook of what the EBO report, how it was performing. This is year 3. So we're really kind of at this place where we're not sure that we need to continue to prepare that, but if that's something that this board wants to continue to see, because we are continuing to produce it, as Christopher noted, let us know that.
And then finally, I'll end with the EBO annual report. As Michelle mentioned, it was produced in our last, for this Q1 is when it was published. So the highlight from that is we talk about the proposed spend that is not in that report now for last year. We had $192 million in proposed spend with black and brown owned farms. That was $67 million or 54% increase over last fiscal year's EBO report. We had $323 million in proposed spending with women-owned firms. That was $224 million or 226% increase over the last EBO annual report. And I will say for contracts that did close during FY22, 100% of those contracts that were completed, they met or exceeded the EBO goals that were proposed at the time the contract was awarded.
For MBEs.
For MBEs. And for WBEs, 75% of those contracts met or exceeded their proposed contractor participation goal for women-owned farms.
And just to add context, we understand why, before Dr. Kroom asked me.
Because you know I know.
We understand why the woman-owned business target was not met, and it has to do with the debarment of one of our businesses based upon independent price, arriving at independent pricing and bids, and it was a debarrable offense, and so they were debarred. They had a prime contract that they were unable to, that was terminated. And as a result, then they did not meet the entirety of that goal or of that participation. I say that, Dr. Kroom, and they were subs, on other contracts, and so they were debarred and were removed.
And now I'll turn it over to Mr. Al Watson for the business development report.
Good morning. You have the report before you, of course. I think that what I think is very important to highlight here is there have been a few changes as we are moving back into some sense of normalcy, as I would call it. We have decided to move our trainings and networking events into a hybrid situation where for basically the past 2 years, everything's been online. We're doing some things that are in person now. We've seen a huge change there. Our numbers for Q2 are going to be out the roof. As I said, we've had some events that are in person that allowed us the ability to connect with our suppliers in a bigger way. You can tell that has been missed a great deal over the past 2 years, as well as our partners. Our partners are doing the same. There have been a multitude of events. I'm sure if you've seen online and in the news of activities going on with business resource organizations. So the information presented here, I think the only thing to highlight is that our numbers have been pretty consistent with our MBEs, WBEs, and SBEs. A little ebb and flow as usual, just based on the fact that for I'll say for Mr. Tarnley, mainly in case you are not already aware, but Michelle probably already brought you abreast to that, is that our suppliers are certified by our certified entities and as well as our SBEs, and that ebb and flows because once they get recertified, there's an annual renewal for some, and some 2 or 3. It just really varies upon the certified entity that they're certified with. And so when that expires, they have to update that information with us. So what we do have is a little ebb and flow in terms of when they update us with their information. So you'll see a little bit of change there, but it's pretty level. I don't think there's much else to share, but I look forward to sharing all that we've got going on for the upcoming fiscal year, as it's very exciting to see us going back into where we once were. And that's all I have, unless there's any questions.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Where it says black and brown owned,
Yes.
is there a distinction of how many is black and how many is brown?
Well, we do have that, yes, because you're certified based on what entity you're certified. It varies. Let me say that. It depends on the certification you have. There are some certified entities that they let us know what their certification is and what they're certified as, but you have to look into that information. You fall within that category if you're certified as a minority, and then like NMSDC, they provide how they're certified, if they're Native American, things of that nature. We don't mark it in our system. Well, we track it based on actuals, not certified. So if they're doing business and they receive a contract, then yes, we track it in that way, but we don't track it for everybody that's certified. Is the easiest way to explain that. Would you agree? Yes. Yeah.
And not across contracts, we don't. But when folks register to do business, they tell us, I'm African American, or they say, I'm Asian American, I'm, Hispanic American, or what have you. And then they tell us, I'm certified. And then they present the certificate. So black and brown will be primarily minority owned, as Javal said, depending on where they got certified. So, for example, if they got certified through the Governor's Office of Diversity Business, they could choose me, for example. I could say, I'm a brown woman, but I'm going to get certified as a minority business. I could have selected to be certified as a woman-owned business. But when I register, I could say, I'm African American, I'm a minority business, I'm certified. We have that distinction, but it's not reported quite that way, is what Javal is saying to you.
Thank you.
So turning back to Mr. Wood's report, page 3 of the pullout, what is the basis for these different categories, African American, Hispanic, Asian? Is that based on their self-reporting? Okay.
So when they register, they're able to tell us if they are one of those ethnic groups or woman-owned, and then they're able to tell us if they are certified. There's a process that's engaged with MBAO to then validate that certificate against certification information in B2G Now, as well as physical certificates to confirm it.
Thank you.
Are you all set? Can we move on to regulations?
Yes, ma'am.
Who wants to present that?
Before the Standards Board is the modification of our procurement regulation regarding bonding, contract performance and payment bonds. It's regulation section 4.20.030. It's on the 4th page of your packet, so if you would count, or the 5th, I'm sorry, the 5th page of your packet. And the black, the black,
Page 1 in our books.
the portion at the top in black is the existing regulation.
It's in the code, Metro Code?
It's in the regulations. The code speaks to contract performance and payment bonds. The procurement regulations give a little more detail. Currently, the procurement regulations allow for the purchasing agent to reduce the value of bond amounts for construction up to 50% of the contract price. Not really something that we do very often, but it does provide that opportunity. The General Services Department presented to us a suggestion that the way that we are currently bonding or requiring the bonding of construction manager at risk and design build contracts may not be appropriate for the industry, meaning, and for the code, meaning we would require a bond for the entirety of the contract value, but there's design work and there's pre-construction work that technically should not be bonded. So our Tom Cross in our law department worked with our construction and design team and general services to develop some language to be included on this section of the procurement regulations that would allow for those specific design build and construction manager at risk contracts to exclude the portion of the contract value that is related to those pre-construction costs as well as those design costs, and it allows for the bonds to be presented within 10 days after the execution of the contract. After the execution of the contract amendment that establishes our guaranteed maximum price. The issue there is to ensure that we don't have any substantive work that is performed that should be covered by the bonds. So it really kind of forces the establishment of that GMP as well. So that's what this regulation accomplishes.
Does anyone have any questions or comments?
And I would just like to say that we've got our construction and design team. I don't know, Mike, are you the manager or the director of construction and design for general services is here. Mike is the expert. He's the subject matter expert on this stuff, on the construction and design, and he identified this as a weakness in our process.
Does anyone have any questions or anything?
I do have one question. The beginning of this is very specific related to, as it relates to design, build, and we've done this process with one of our Head Start centers. I guess clearly we're saying that certain things that they're doing, I guess the design process and so on that they did for us in terms of the center, what it would look like, there was a process that they went through with us prior to any construction or anything starting. But I guess what I'm curious about is the statement excludes the cost of pre-construction services inclusive of just that, or could it be other things that would be pre-construction that you're also trying to exclude? If that makes no sense to you all at all. But the language seems to be very specific in the beginning around when you think of what a design build project looks like. But then it specifically says it's for pre-construction services, that it doesn't have to be bonded. Is that going to include anything that could be potentially pre-construction services? That's what I'm trying to understand.
So, and Mike, you can keep me honest on this, but my understanding of the construction industry is that there are certain divisions of construction, and there are certain elements of construction that are clearly identified as pre-construction work. So it would include those things like, I believe, site work, some grading and site work that would be done. Would that be included, Mike?
Let me try to answer it this way, Dr. Crewman, correct me too, but I think what we're trying to do is provide clarity to get back to the Miller Act, and Macy, don't let me misspeak on this, is what we're trying to federal regulation and then the Little Miller Act. But the intent of that is to cover construction dollars, labor and material to actually build the building, and there's the gray area of whether that that means, because in the two delivery methods that it mentions, design build and the construction manager at risk, with design build, the contractor hires the architect. So they could be considered a subcontractor, and so a subcontractor typically builds stuff. In this case, they're a designer, and we're not trying to cover that. So does it say design and pre-construction?
It does.
So design is obviously the design services. Pre-construction is typically what the contractor provides to Metro for advisement during the design phase. So that's what that's meant to reference. And then it mentions if we're not ready yet. This goes beyond your question, I think, but we're not ready yet for to establish the guaranteed maximum price, which is the point in the contract. The contractor feels comfortable enough to establish that top dollar amount. And we do some early work to keep the project going. This statement mentions that whenever there's construction starting, that's when the bonds are required for. All getting back to the intent of that regulation that is meant to cover labor and material for actual construction of the building. So that's what it was intended to do. Currently, I think we're requiring bonds on everything. And like similar with the construction manager approach, they don't hire the architect, but they provide to the owner pre-construction advisement services. So that's what it's trying to clarify.
So any specific, what I'm hearing, and I think it's consistent with my understanding, is any substantive work related to the actual construction of the building would be covered by the bonds.
And that's really what I was trying to get to, because it just... Okay.
Anything else on it? At the end of the day, we don't know. Of course, we'd have to look at it over time, and it's really hard to make the comparison because every project is unique. But it should result in some degree of cost savings, because when those, contractors are bonding the entire contract value, they're passing that price off to us.
We need a motion to approve?
Yes.
Can somebody make a motion?
I move the adoption of the newly proposed language for Regulation 4.203030.02.
Second? Anyone?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? Additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Is that really it? Just the calendar? That's it? Look at that. All right, well. Our next meeting is scheduled for February 23rd, 2023 at 9. So.
Does that date work for everyone? We pushed that back a week. And I will tell everyone why we pushed it back a week. What we want to get you your board packets as soon as possible, but the way that the quarter ends and the audits for accounting, closing the books for accounting, as well as the audits for our M&WBE participation, it runs us literally a week before the meetings have been scheduled, and that just doesn't give sufficient time for the notice that's required on our website, as well as giving you time to review the reports.
So 9 a.m.? There's a department heads monthly meeting over here at 11. So that's why I was asking about the time.
Yeah, I mean...
If it's 9 a.m., that gives us 2 hours.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
An hour more than we've ever taken.
Yes. Or I'm just saying, it'd be best, I think, if we could end prior to, just right before 11 a.m. So either 9 or 10, whatever people prefer.
You don't know yet. We got to get with them.
Well, because that's the fourth Thursday. Is that the fourth Thursday?
I think
it's my board meeting. It's usually when they have their retreat, so I'm probably not going to be.
Okay, so it sounds like we need to go back to the drawing board and propose a new date.
Fine by me. Yeah. Anybody have any other?
Or if we've got a majority and a quorum, a majority and a
But it's really not a party without Dr. Groom.
She's like, I'm trying not to be here.
It is Michelle's blood pressure?
Well, we'll figure it out. I mean, we can do that via email, right? We don't have to set it in this meeting, do we?
No, we can, yeah.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other open items? Was that too painful, or you feel good about it? Okay, good. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, motion carries. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.